Morning all. How about I pray before we read? Lord, we thank you for your word. We pray for today as Dave comes to speak to us about this passage, which is long and also challenging, that you might prepare our hearts and prepare us for what Dave says and the messages that were within it. I mean, this is long. There's 3 chapters. I'll do my best not to go too fast, but not too slow. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so that it might devour her child the moment he was born. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter, and her child was snapped up to God and to his throne. The woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the world astray. He was hurled to the earth and his angels with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven say, "Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters who accuses them before our God day and night has been hurled down. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you. He is filled with fury, because he knows that his time is short." When the dragon saw that he had been hurled to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. The woman was given the 2 wings of a great eagle so that she might fly to the place prepared for her in the wilderness, where she would be taken care of for a time, times, and half a time, out of the serpent's reach. Then from his mouth a serpent spewed water like a river to overtake the woman and sweep her away with a torrent. But the earth helped the woman by opening its mouth and swallowing the river that the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. Then the dragon was enraged at the woman and went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring, those who keep God's commands and hold fast their testimony about Jesus. The dragon stood on the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on its horns, and on each head a blasphemous name. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a bear and a mouth like that of a lion. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. One of the heads of the beast seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. The whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. People worshipped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast, and they also worshipped the beast and asked, "Who is like the beast? Who can wage war against it?" The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies, and to exercise its authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place, and those who live in heaven. It was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them. And it was given authority over every tribe, people, language and nation. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written in the Lamb's book of life. The Lamb who was slain from the creation of the world. Whoever has ears, let them hear. If anyone is to go into captivity they will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword, With the sword they will be killed. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of God's people. Then I saw a second beast coming out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. It exercised all the authority of the first beast on its behalf, and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. And it performed great signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to the earth in full view of the people. Because of the signs it was given power to perform on behalf of the first beast, it deceived the inhabitants of the earth. It ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. The second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is 666. Then I looked, and there before me was the Lamb, standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000 who had his name and his Father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard a sound from heaven like the roar of rushing waters and like a loud peal of thunder. The sound I heard was like that of harpists playing their harps. And they sang a new song before the throne and before the 4 living creatures and the elders. No one could learn the song except the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. These are those who did not defile themselves with women, for they remain virgins. They follow the Lamb wherever he goes. They were purchased from among mankind and offered as firstfruits to God and the Lamb. No lie was found in their mouths. They are blameless. Then I saw another angel flying in midair, and he had the eternal gospel to proclaim to those who live on the earth, to every nation, tribe, language, and people. He said in a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and the springs of water." A second angel followed and said, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, which made all the nations drink the maddening wine of her adulteries." A third angel followed them and said in a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast and its image and receives its mark on their forehead or on their hand, they too will drink the wine of God's fury, which has been poured full strength into the cup of his wrath. They will be tormented with burning sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and of the Lamb, and the smoke of their torment will rise forever and ever. There will be no rest day or night for those who worship the beast and its image, or for anyone who receives the mark of his name." This calls for patient endurance on the part of the people of God, who keep his commandments and remain faithful to Jesus. Then I heard a voice from heaven say, "Write this. Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, they will rest from their labor, for their deeds will follow them." I looked, and there before me was a white cloud, and seated on the cloud was one like the Son of Man, with a crown of gold on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand. Then another angel came out of the temple and called in a loud voice to him who was sitting on the cloud, "Take your sickle and reap, because the time to reap has come, for the harvest of the earth is ripe." So he who was seated on the cloud swung his sickle over the earth, and the earth was harvested. Then another angel came out of the temple in heaven, and he too had a sharp sickle. Still another angel who had charge of the fire came from the altar and called in a loud voice to him who had the sharp sickle, "Take your sharp sickle and gather the clusters of grapes from the earth's vine, because its grapes are ripe." The angel swung the sickle on the earth, gathered its grapes, and threw them into the great winepress of God's wrath. They were trampled in the winepress outside the city, and blood flowed out of the press, rising as high as the horses' bridles for a distance of 1,600 stadia.
Thanks, Tom, for that marathon reading. Revelations 12 to 14. We're an evangelical church. That means we're a Bible-believing church. It'd be really handy if you had Bible with you. Some people have Bibles on their phone. There's this app called YouVersion. That's a great thing to have where you can follow along on your phone or go old school like I have and bring it along, because because it's a big passage, just going to be referring to a few things as we go through. See, life gets busy, and at times you just need to be flexible. Compromising seems to be the only way to deal with things with so many demands upon us. We just need to compromise. However, while compromising seems like a thing we not only have to do, but it's actually might even sound like a good virtue to be able to compromise, to be flexible, is also a watering down of what we really want. When you and I compromise, none of us get what we really want in important things in life. In fact, we don't want to compromise. So if I'm abseiling 100 metres up in above the ground, I don't want to compromise on the rope I choose to use to hold my body. I don't want to compromise with the brakes in my car. I don't want them to stop me half the time. I want them to stop me all the time. Indeed, compromise on the wrong thing, and it's really dangerous. Well, John's revelation is at a time in history when Christians were under a lot of pressure and would have felt the need to compromise with the society that they lived in, with the demands upon them. John's first vision gives us insight into some of the pressures that they were facing. Now, the first vision in chapter 2 to 3 is kind of like when John talks about the 7 churches. We went through that a few years ago. And so John addresses the different churches. And there, as you read there, you see the pressure that they're under. For example, living in the Roman Empire, or being a part of the Roman Empire, required you to worship the emperor as God. It became, there was pressure under Nero, but it became even more pressure under Domitian, who decided that while he was even living, he should be called Lord and God, and demanded that he be worshipped. This was thought to keep all of Rome together. If they worshipped the one God, the emperor, it would keep all the nations together as one. Of course, Christians wouldn't bow the knee to the emperor, for there is only one God and one Lord, Jesus Christ. Life for Christians then became very difficult, very painful, and it was only going to get worse. Again, as we read about what was happening in the churches in chapter 2, verse 13, we already see that Antipas had been killed in Pergamum because of his faith. It is in this context that John receives this revelation. He's also under pressure. He's been exiled because of his faith on this island called Patmos. And there he gets this revelation. And this revelation, it's like the curtains are pulled back and he gets to see what's happening behind the scene. Gets see behind what he sees. Lots of people think that Revelation doesn't make sense. But it's the world we live in that doesn't make sense. For the early Christians, it was the world they lived in that didn't make sense. The chaos of this world doesn't make sense. The tyrants who rule like the emperor, who demand to be worshipped, demand obedience, loyalty and honour above God, doesn't make sense. How is it that we have a God who is all-powerful and he's just, he's righteous, yet we look around the world and we see chaos and destruction and brokenness and tyrants? It doesn't make sense. The early Christians knew Jesus was the Messiah. That's the gospel they proclaimed. They knew he was king. They knew he lived amongst them. He was a son of God. They knew he died, and they knew he'd risen. They even knew that he had taken on and God's kingdom had come. That was what they believed. But it doesn't make sense in Rome with the Roman Empire when the emperor demanding worship and persecuting Christians because they wouldn't bow the knee. It makes no sense. Revelation makes sense of a world that doesn't make sense. In chapters 12 to 14, again, the curtain is drawn back, and what we see is the unseen reality. And what we see is a war that has taken place, and a war that is taking place right now in the world and in your life, even today, whether you realise it or not. You see, you have an enemy who is engaged in a war for your soul. His goal is to alienate you from Christ and claim you as his own. He wants to use you in his futile attempts to defeat God. The chapters speak of the victory of Christ and his promise to protect those who are his. But they are also a warning for us to stay alert, to know the battle is on, that there's a war raging amongst us, so that we might brace ourselves, so that we might ready ourselves, so that we might arm ourselves for the battle. None of us think we're vulnerable to transferring our allegiance from Christ to Satan. But most who have given their allegiance to him are completely unaware of what they've done. They would describe themselves in terms as, well, they think themselves as non-religious. Good neighbours, committed professionals, doting parents who only want the best for their children. Even some might call themselves truth tellers for society. Those whose allegiance is to Satan haven't joined a club. They haven't got together with like-minded people and rallied together. It's more subtle than that. They might even come to church and say they believe in Christ and what he has done. See, what it is, it's just a really simple thing. What they've done in forming their allegiance with the enemy, with Satan, is they've replaced Christ as their primary and first allegiance with something else. Or they've just needed to make a compromise to fit it all in. And that is why we need revelation. Through John, we're able to see the world from the vantage point of heaven. And in these chapters 12 to 14, John sees 7 things. 7 seems to be the number, and it is meant to be because it's symbolic for a complete whole. We've seen 7 seals open. We've had 7 trumpets blast, and now John sees 7 things. And I'm just going to go through them. The first thing he sees is just chapter 12. He sees a helpless woman looking about like she's about to give birth. And waiting for her to give birth is this enormous, fierce red dragon, which claimed to be like godlike status. That is the 7 heads. That's a god kind of symbol. And he was waiting to devour the child. She is clothed with sun, with the moon under her feet, and with a crown of 12 stars on her head. Isaiah describes God's redeemed people to come in this same way. This is God's people, God's redeemed. And of course, Mary is part of God's redeemed. She comes to represent them in this way and gives birth to a son who will rule. Of course, that's Jesus, isn't it? This is a Christmas story in chapter 12. The promise of one to come and rule with an iron scepter goes back to the prophecies of Genesis 49 with Jacob and Psalm 2. And of course, we know it's fulfilled in Jesus coming. King Herod at this time of Jesus' birth heard that a king was about to be born and heard of his rule. And so he, feeling threatened, he sought out the child to destroy him. You might remember the account of Matthew's Gospel. But there is something more going on as well. After the child is snapped up to God, that's of course is Jesus' ascension into heaven. The woman flees into the wilderness. It's thought that that's referring to the early church. It's their persecution from Jerusalem, and from that persecution they fled into escaping into the Transjordan, into the kind of Asia Minor, like into those area of those 7 churches. That's where they fled to there, and that's where they started talking about Jesus and formed other churches in that area. The church grew as a consequence. So that's thought to be around in the 60s under Nero's rule that all this happened, and all kind of recorded in chapter 2 and 3. All these things took place on earth. But verses 7 and 9 speak of the spiritual reality behind these events. Christ's death, and most importantly, his ascension, is the defeat of Satan. This is the war that took place. When Jesus took the throne, Satan was cast out. There we read Satan's intentions in verse 9 is to lead the world away from Christ. Earlier in chapter 9, he was described as the destroyer. He destroys because his intentions is to lead people away from Christ. That is how they're destroyed. Verse 10, Satan once was in heaven, accusing God's people before God. Now, no longer. Now, who is in heaven? It is Christ himself, our Messiah, who doesn't speak a word of accusation, but speaks a word of forgiveness. His blood speaks of our righteousness. His blood speaks of our, well, the word used in this section is blamelessness. And this has all taken place. That's the war that has taken place. But just to go back for a moment, as we kind of reflect on what Herod and the dragon we see devouring looking to devour the baby of the woman is Satan. So what did we say then if this is Herod and John is kind of helping people understand what's going on in the world, and we're talking, Herod was looking to kill Jesus. Is Herod then possessed? Is he a dragon? Is he Satan himself? Is he the incarnate of Satan? What's going on there? And the answer is no, of course not. But when, and this is really important, when Herod pursued Jesus because of his own insecurities, he was doing the work of the enemy. The voice from heaven in verses 10 to 12 reveals the spiritual reality of the days we live in now. So verse 10, then I heard a loud voice in heaven say, now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of the Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters, who accuses them before our God day and night, has been hurled down. That is, he's been defeated now because Jesus reigns now. And so those who were once accused by him are no longer. In fact, we read verse 11, they triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. Now that is significant for what else is revealed in the present day war of what they did. Verse 12, therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you will dwell in them. But woe to the earth and sea, because the devil has gone down to you. He is filled with fury, because he knows that his time is short. And so John sees a number of other things, and this is about the current war that's going on for the Christians in the Roman Empire, and what is happening there. John saw the dragon near the sea and the beast coming out of the sea. Daniel's, the Old Testament guy who he wrote in the same style as John's right now, this apocalyptic style. And he had vision of beasts as well. And these beasts were interpreted as the empires that looked so dominant, that ruled. And Daniel's kind of story in chapter 7 is about how these kingdoms that look all so powerful and so great will one day be no longer. There'll be one kingdom, and that'll be the kingdom of God. And the king in the kingdom of God is one like the Son of Man. He'll be appointed and he'll rule forever. Well, this same kind of imagery is used here. It's thought that the beast from the sea is referring to the Roman Empire and its ability to use the Mediterranean Sea for its conquests and its rule, its power. By using imagery to describe Rome and her emperors, John then couldn't be accused of treason, which wouldn't have been going too well for him, being he's kind of exiled already. Anyway, the beast demanded worship, probably referring to Domitian's and his call for emperor worship. And who is behind this powerful beast who thinks he's a god and demands allegiance and honour above God? It's none other than the dragon himself, verse 2, Satan. And who is this dragon again? It is him who has been defeated, him who has been cast down from heaven and can no longer accuse God's people. But he has a time on earth to wreak havoc. The third thing John sees or saw was a second beast coming out of the earth. He too speaks with authority. But most have thought this is referring to the high priest of Proconsular Asia, who ruled on behalf of the emperor in the areas where these 7 churches of Revelation were placed. He made everyone worship the emperor. So he spoke on behalf of the other beast, and he kind of referred everyone to the other beast. You've got to worship him. In fact, he was really set on, because he wanted to kind of, as Rome spread and got wider, he wanted to keep it all together. And so he was very up on seeing people worship the emperor. And so what would happen is he would mark the roll, so to speak. So if you came to worship the emperor, you'd get marked, and you get a register, and you could only buy and sell things. You could only trade in the marketplace if you had this registered paper, this mark from the beast. Of course, Christians wouldn't worship the emperor, and so weren't marked, and so were again impacted financially and in their business and in their trade, in just life was hard. So that is the battle, and then John's fourth thing he saw moves on what is behind this as well. John saw the Lamb, the one who was sacrificed, standing on Mount Zion, God's holy place, with 144,000, symbolising all those saved, all of God's people. They are marked also, not with the registration paper for trade, but with the name of the Lamb and of the name of his Father. They didn't defile themselves with the temple prostitutes or the pagan gods. That is, they kept their allegiance to Christ and have reaped the rewards of their sacrifice. They've been washed clean. They are blameless. The fifth thing in verses 6 to 15 John saw were three angels. The first one had an eternal gospel to proclaim. Verse 7 are the words, "Fear God, give him the glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who made the heavens, the earth and the sea and the springs of water." The second angel, he spoke about Babylon the Great, which has fallen. More will be said about Babylon in later chapters, and so but for now, let me just say the proclamation is saying, you look around you at things that seem so permanent, things that seem so normal, things that seem even so right in the culture, everlasting and powerful. If it's not of God, it will come to nothing. Don't put your hope there. The third angel has a terrifying warning to those who have been marked with the beast. If anyone worships the beast and its image and receives its mark on their forehead or on their hand, they too will drink the wine of God's fury, which has been poured out full strength into the cup of his wrath. They will be tormented with burning sulphur in the presence of his holy angels and of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment will rise forever and ever. Hell is not a one-off punishment. It is forever and ever. There'll be no rest day or night for those who worship the beast and its image, or for anyone who receives the mark of its name. You see the great need, don't you, of doing life series, inviting our friends. You see what's at stake. Verse 14:20, the sixth thing that John saw was Jesus' final judgment. You see, there's a message proclaimed today, but there will be a time when the Father sends an angel to Jesus, because Jesus doesn't even know the time. People kind of use Revelation to work out the future and stuff. Jesus doesn't even know the time. The angel comes from the Father to Jesus, who's there with the sickle and says, "Now." Jesus gathers those who are his, and those who stand against him are punished eternally. There is no gospel to proclaim of salvation that day. The seventh thing that John saw comes in chapter 15, and we'll look at that next week. But let me just finish here, because I wish we kind of had more time to go through the details of all that we've said so far. There's much to look at here. If all you have, though, is a vision of the world, what is before your eyes, you're not going to make sense of the gospel claims. You're not going to make sense of suffering. You're not going to make sense of, we'll say up the front here, Jesus rose, he is king. It's not going to make sense. But from a heavenly perspective, what we get in Revelation, this heavenly perspective, Jesus is on the throne and he waits patiently, because salvation is still being proclaimed and people are still being saved. But there is a time when he will take his sickle and it will be all over. Actually, it won't be over. It will just begin forever and ever. Both the torment, which is a dreadful thing, and the glory for those who are his. And what does this revelation call us to do? Well, John tells us exactly what it calls us to do. In chapter 13, verse 10, when John reveals, because of the beast, and there's going to be those who oppose people of faith. Christians, of course, will be called to, it's almost like expected, you're going to be called to suffer, maybe even die. He says there, this calls for patient endurance. And then later on, chapter 14, verse 12, in the light of God's final judgment, and in the end of it all, where God brings those to his, and because of what is ours to come, there he says, this calls for patient endurance. And in between these two callings for patient endurance, there's another response in chapter 13, verse 18. It's in light of the description of the land beast who looks like a god, although a little one, not as big as the big beast, but it kind of looks all legit. But and people are kind of convinced, but he's just human. His number is a human number, 666, the symbolism there. In light of that, there is a call for wisdom. As we're in the midst of the war, there is a call for wisdom. Wisdom that understands things as they are, that understands Jesus' rule, and what is mine to come is far greater than anything I can gain now, and worth any suffering that I might endure now, particularly suffering for his sake. Wisdom says following Jesus can't be reduced to a hobby, no matter how sincere my heart might be towards God. He is the king and deserves all of me. In fact, he demands it. There is no compromise. There is no balancing in life when it comes to faith. He demands radical, uncompromising devotion. But is this revelation what we believe? I heard someone refer to David Bentley Hart, and I looked up one of his quotes. He's a guy who's, other people describe him as a theologian. He writes books about God, so that's why they call him a theologian. But he doesn't describe himself as a theologian. He certainly doesn't believe what we believe. He doesn't believe what we've been looking through at John's Revelation today. But Hart goes to a church, and at his church there is this Christian philosopher, and he made these comments about him, because in his discussion with him about things such as this, Hart says of him, the quote should be there. Anyway, I'll read it for you. I cannot take the claims of this philosopher entirely seriously from any angle, for the simple reason that his actions are so resplendently belie what he professes to believe. If he truly thought that our situation in this world were as horribly perilous as he claims, then how would he be able to rest for a moment? Because he'd be driven ceaselessly around the world in a desperate frenzy of evangelism, seeking to save as many souls from the eternal fire as possible. I think of him as a remarkably compassionate person. You see, And so his more or less sedentary and distractedly scholarly style of life, to my mind, speaks volumes, even libraries. If he were really absolutely convinced of the things he thinks he's convinced of, and still continue to go his merry way along the path of happy professional contentment, he would have to be a moral monster. But I don't think he's a moral monster. So I have to think instead that, in his heart of hearts, at a level of calm conviction so deeply hidden beneath the veils of childhood indoctrination that he is all but unaware of its existence, he keeps the treasures, the certainty that in the end, in the words of Dame Julian Norwich, all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. Revelation says, in the end, we'll stand before our Lord. Not all will be well for all. Revelation reveals what really matters. It reveals what is the real problem with the world. And it's not poverty, it's not education, it's not Trump, whatever. It's not what people would come up with. The real problem is the world is we'll stand before our Lord one day, and it will be forever his judgment. His revelation calls for wisdom and patient endurance in the truth, no matter what it costs. And it says quite plainly in the scriptures, it will cost. We don't have an emperor that demands us to worship as Lord. The problem with our culture and the problem with the war that we face is I'm the emperor. I'm told that I'm the king. I can do what I like as long as I don't hurt any other people. The world is about my pleasure. It's about me enjoying things and just kind of, getting through it all. The war is so subtle, and we need to be on our guard. We must not usurp the lordship of Christ. This revelation is God's gospel revealed, and the question we ask, do you believe it? I pray that you do, and that together we may stand in it until the end, no matter what. This is the gospel truth and perspective that I believe. I'm going to sing a song now. That I believe Horatio Spofford, he wrote this song, It Is Well With My Soul. Yeah, it's a pretty sad story. You've probably heard it before, where it's a long story, so I'm not going to go into it now. I think I've spoken long enough. But he passes the place. He's in a ship, and he sails over the place where his daughters were lay at the bottom of the ocean. They drowned in a previous ship. And the story goes that as he passed this place filled with grief, he went back to his cabin and penned these words. It is well with my soul. It is well. How could you say such a thing in such a traumatic time? Horrific circumstances? It's because you know he is king and he's on the throne. And the messiness of this world and life will not one day cease. And we will be with him forever and ever. And he'll wipe every tear away. It is well with my soul. It is well.